ReefFresh
I'm Derek.
is sponsored by Derek's Reef Shop
You know, let's mess him
and
up.
the Fresh Side.
What's that?
The
One
show
week
is
we
also
should really
sponsored
mess him
by
Why?
Tropic
You
Marin,
be Kevin.
as pure and natural as possible.
It's funny, we always
We also
say the
have
same
Humble
place.
Fish, your guide to
Hey, Zach.
quarantine fish.
This is Zach. Come on, Zach. Up. And this is Zach. This is Zach. He's my little sweetheart. Right, Zach?
Hey, so
All right.
what are we doing this week?
What are we doing this week? What do you mean?
What are we doing this week?
All right. Well, we just this week we have a special guest. It's actually 55 minutes long.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. Like our interview with him was 55 minutes long. So I cut the beginning when we're just talking.
Just edit it out a little bit here and there.
out here and there. So
Even some of the stuff we said at the end, you could probably take a little bit of that off too.
yeah, I haven't edited the whole thing, so I just wanted to add this part in there.
Yeah, because we were kind of chit chat. We were chit chatting actually for a little bit. So you can take out the chit chat and maybe add it a separate video for that or something.
Yeah, whatever. We can do something like that. So, anyways, we had our guest actually like kind of name his product of the week, fish of the week, Saltwater, and the pay to learn. So we asked him,
We did
that.
an interview. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
the only thing is we didn't do a fish of the week for freshwater. That's the only thing, so we have to add that on there.
Oh.
Yeah, so we'll have to add something there. Anyway, so so let's just go right to our announcement. We're our one of our first guests. This is all Kevin's work. So humble.fish, Bobby, who started this website, who started this whole quarantine thing.
He's been doing experiments on quarantining, like different techniques and things like that.
See what worked, what didn't work,
and then he has a few friends that are kind of working with him, and there's a whole list on, and he'll talk about it. He'll talk about the list of fish and how they're trying different types of quarantining, but it's an excellent website. Go to it. Like to get as many Canadians on there as we can.
No, it's true.
And
if you want to learn about if you want to learn about the hobby, learn how some protocols to take to do your quarantine and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And like I like the fact that he actually mentioned about corals and inverts. You know what I mean? That you should quarantine these because the trophones can be on those things, and within a week or two they'll release. And you're wondering why you're getting ick into your tank. That's because it was, like we said, it was contaminated with from your inverts or whatever. So you introduced it. Anyway, so Bobby will explain all that. So I hope you guys enjoy the show.
Yeah, give us a thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs up, thumbs down. We'll have a lot more of these on the show.
Oh yeah.
I can't believe we made it to episode 20.
I got a few people lined up there that I've been chatting with, so I've been chit-chatting with some people. And
No, it's all good.
And we'll have some more guests coming up.
All right, so fish of the week, freshwater. Let's throw that in there. Let's start off with that, actually. So what did we bring in next door? That we already talked about tetras and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We did the coolie loaches last week. What else did we bring in there that she brought in? Oscars.
Yeah, well, the Oscars
I think
they're a cichlid. I don't know if we did Oscars before or not, but they get freaking big.
They're in the cichlid family?
Oh yeah, they're in the cichlid family. New World cichlids or South American cichlids, whatever you want to call them. But they, a big Oscar, he'll tip the scale at over 12 inches, right? Like,
and he'll eat anything, right? Almost like
anything
a
would fit in his mouth. Anything would fit in his mouth. Yeah. Like my Oscar I had years and years ago, he was 13 and a half inches. You could pet him. He'd literally come to the top and lay there until you opened it, and then you could rub his belly, and he'd just lay there, and you could rub his belly. And
he didn't take it to chomp after you?
No, I fed him by hand. He was a beautiful fish, very intelligent fish, right?
Well, most predator fish, that's one thing people need to know, that most predator fish are more intelligent.
Yeah. And they get big, so I mean, you need a good substantial tank for them. You can have more than one Oscar in your tank. You just gotta watch, like, sometimes, especially if like you end up having two males.
Of course, yeah. Any two males.
When they start to get bigger and the tank's a little smaller, you might get one start to pick on the other guy.
Yeah.
But if you have a really good good sized tank, 100 gallons, bigger or whatever.
And that's that. Let's go outside.
Um,
And there goes the other one.
And plants don't bother. Live plants just don't bother.
Because they'll rip right through.
Yeah, they'll tear them up, the roots out and stuff like that. Remember, it's a big fish, so when he goes to move his tail to take a little spin. The other thing, my Oscar used to break my heater.
Oh yeah, you would see the pilot light.
You see, yeah, and
So it'd be good to take some tape or something and hide your pilot light.
well, there's guards now that you can put on them.
Yeah.
Little black guards. But yeah, he broke 2 heaters, and you just at night you hear this clank, clank, and it would be him hitting the heater, hitting the back glass, and it would be clanking, and he cracked them. And he hit that pilot light. It was weird. Anyway.
It's like us playing with power lines. Like, oh, what are you doing that for?
But yeah, so anyway, I ended up putting a foam cover over it, like the ones that comes on different
Pools? Pool noodle?
No, not a pool noodle. It was like a cover for a return pump.
Oh, okay, the foam, that kind of
That
thing.
foam.
Yeah.
So I just put that on it, and that stopped. I mean, we're talking 30 years ago or more than 30 years ago.
We didn't have the nice suction cups.
Yeah, we didn't have all the little toys and stuff we have now, but yeah, Oscar's beautiful fish. You can put them in Jack Dempsey's, Leprinus headstanders, fire mouths, all those types of cichlids, right? Severums, anything that will hold their own, but not too aggressive.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I have a little open discussion here, just because people, some guy, sorry, I'm looking at Zach. Someone messaged me on Facebook and said, you know what? He goes, I set up a little small nano tank. This is saltwater, a little nano tank in my daughter's bedroom. And he says, I checked this up when I put the tank up. He says, my alkalinity was like at 9 point something.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, after like 3 days, 4 days, it dropped down to like 6. He goes, I don't understand. There's no corals in there. There's nothing. He goes, I don't get it. I'm like, I was kind of puzzled too. I said, well, is there a coralline algae in there? And he goes, no, it's a brand new tank. It's not. You know what I mean? I was like, okay, I thought maybe he had a used tank, had coralline, because coralline algae will deplete your alkalinity.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, and we're just going back and forth. And I was just, you sure your test kit is good and this and that, and and I said, you know what? Test your water, like your out of the tap, not out of the tap off, out of your reverse osmosis, your auto top off water. And yeah, he tested it and had zero for alkalinity. I was like, well, there it is, because every time you're topping off the tank,
you're lowering
your alkalinity. And I said, and it's a small tank.
Yep. It don't
So it doesn't take much to drop that fast, right? So so if you're ever wondering why, you know,
and we talked about that in another show. Test your
I think we did.
Water.
But test your water hardness in your reverse osmosis and your calcium and your magnesium. Test that just to see. And that's why, like I find, like in the city water here in Moncton, alkalinity is low. Is that what was it when we test Bass Pro? I think it's like 40, which is like 4 point something DKH.
Yeah.
So if you're ever wondering why some tanks consume more alkalinity than others, it all
Check your source water.
Yeah, your source water.
But the thing is too, you got to remember, and then we were talking about larger volumes, more stability.
Yes.
So if he had a larger tank,
he would have not really noticed that much.
Right.
Then he asked me, he goes, I'll put a doser on there. I said, you need a high-end doser. He goes, what do you mean you need a high-end doser?
Yeah.
Well, if you buy the cheap dosers out there today, the only minimum dose you can do is like 10 mils. 10 mils in the nano tank, you're going to crash the system, because you're just going to be throwing too much alkalinity in there.
Right.
And he goes, well, what do I do? And I said, well, just mix them in your ATO. Just test your ATO water. Make yourself a 5-gallon bucket separate and bring the alkalinity up in there.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay, that'll do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I mean, there's some dosers out there that can dose 0.1 milliliter.
Right.
Where the cheap dosers,
Well, you get what you pay for.
You get what you pay for, but I mean, it's just because you're a small volume.
Yeah.
You need to buy yourself like a $600-700 doser to be able to dose like 0.1 mil.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yep.
That's it. That's all I had.
That's it. Well, you're gonna have to make this 2 videos, because if you add us now to the 55 minutes, you're over an hour.
Or over an hour. But it's a good hour. It's actually, you know what, people like, you need to listen to this guy, you know, not because of Kevin or because of me, because I'm a store. People say, oh, Derek's a store, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But no, we're...
Well, we started this to get information, good information.
Yeah, well, you know what? I started this because I was tired of going to the big box store and not getting any info. And back, like I said, back in the day, there was no internet.
Yeah.
You go into books.
Yep.
These books here, you're reading through books.
Yep.
Try to buy some books. You know, coming from the Maritime was, you know, sorry, but La Libreria Acadiana didn't have these books, so you had to purchase them. We had to find where to purchase them, so we had to order them through the U.S. So that's how I learned.
Yeah.
You know, through this hobby. You know, this little pocketbook. Man, did I go through this little pocketbook?
Yep.
I went for fish and one for marine invertebrates. There was no live aquaria. There was nothing like that.
No, I remember.
Yeah. So, listening to Bobby. Bobby's, yeah, he knows what he's talking about. You know, he's done a lot of mistakes in this. Same thing like us. You know, you pay to learn. There's a lot of pay to learns in there. So, yeah.
Cool. All right.
Awesome. Support local fish store.
And see you next week.
See you next week.
Or next episode.
Next episode. Where is that?
Expensive, but what we do is we're doing like this little refresh, we call it, with chit chat with Derek and I, and we like to put good information out there, and we try to get the best information out there. Just because there's some people that you know, on the forums you see it all the time, right? Somebody will post a picture and say, I want to put 25 tanks in my 40-gallon tank, and everybody will say, no, you can't do that, until one dingbat comes along and says, oh, I did it a year ago and I had no problem at all. Yeah, and then so, you know, there's people out there with just kind of share some bad information. So we like to try to, you know, keep the as current and best information that we can, right? And of course, quarantining is one of those things that in this day and age, and you know, we really should be quarantining our fish. They're expensive. They're, you know, in salt water, a lot of them out of the wild. So for every fish we take out of the wild and kill in our tanks, that's another one that, you know, is missing out of the wild, right? So
exactly. Yep, exactly. I'm on board with that 100%.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I try to run my shop that way too, right? Like I won't sell a tank to someone who's got a small tank, stuff like that. So we kind of keep that.
It's ethics, like right? You don't want any hippo tang running around in a 39-gallon cube tank. It's just not right for the fish. It's not the right environment. And, you know, hopefully that hobbyist should do research and learn that, you know, the proper environments for these animals is key to keep them alive long term.
Right. And unfortunately, I don't know how it is there, but I mean, here in the US, unfortunately, it's there's a lot of people that jump into the hobby without doing research. It's kind of like, you know, buying a new car, you know, and it's a toy, and they don't quite realize what they're getting themselves into. And then the livestock losses start piling up, and they get frustrated, and, you know, they quit the hobby. Well, you know, how many animals have died, you know, to get to that end point, you know? So that is a huge problem here. You know, I do what I can by teaching and advocating quarantine and just general aquarium husbandry, you know, through my forum, and there's a lot of other people too. But I mean, there's some people, they're just not going to listen. And there's some people, it's strange. Some people actually have to learn the hard way. They've got to incur those losses, and then they do eventually kind of straighten up, so to speak. And there's some people, they just never learn, and they usually, you know, will get out of the hobby after a while. Yeah. So Bobby, tell us a little bit about yourself, just so that people watching who know who you are and why we asked you to join us today, because you're the guru and QT, I guess the best way to put it. So my name is Bobby Miller. A lot of people know me as Humble Fish. That's my online persona, so to speak. I've been in the hobby for a very long time. I actually kind of grew up in the hobby. I was actually 5 years old when I set up my first saltwater aquarium. That was back in 1978. So it's been a while for me. And through my life, I've always had aquariums, and I've had times in my life where I've worked in retail, I've worked in maintenance. Up to just a couple of years ago, I actually was running a business selling quarantine conditioned fish for customers here in the United States. I guess over that time, I've just kind of kept every kind of aquarium you can imagine. I mean, I've done fish only, I've done SPS dominant. I mean, I've kind of dabbled a little bit in everything. And I am currently, I have my own forum, Humble Fish and Reef, where we're trying to educate new hobbyists and experienced hobbyists alike to just improve their overall aquarium husbandry. So I don't have any degrees or anything like that. I'm just a guy that's just been doing this for a very long time. I'm married, but I'm also kind of married to the hobby, it seems.
Yeah, I think all three of us are like that.
Exactly.
So how did you get into like wanting to quarantine fish and stuff like that? What made you get into that?
So my first real, I guess, experience with quarantining was in the late 90s. I worked for a large aquarium maintenance company. And all the fish had to be quarantined before they went to the client's aquariums. And that was my job. My job was I oversaw all quarantine operations for the company. And I just kind of learned from the other people working there. And we would run all the fish through quarantine and, then put them in the client's aquariums. But how it kind of is in your personal tank, you kind of go back and forth between, well, I'm going to quarantine, I'm not going to quarantine. I did do that. And I think when it really hit me was my wife and I we lived in Europe for a number of years, and I didn't quarantine over there either. But when I came back to the United States and I set up my first aquarium after living in Europe for several years, I was killing everything left and right. I mean, here I am, I'm supposed to be teaching others, and especially in particular, it was a powder blue tang. I had this powder blue tang that I fell in love with this fish, and she had ick, she had flukes, she had bacterial infections, and I wasn't quarantining, and it just really affected me emotionally what I was doing to this fish. And I just decided to just, every night I can remember staying up till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, just reading everything I could, not just things you read on back then it was Reef Central, but I was actually doing my own research, peer-reviewed articles that I was finding on Google Scholar, finding what the people with, degrees in marine biology, how they were treating their fish. And I just came up with a treatment plan, and I saved her, and I had her for many, many years. And that really kind of put me on the road that I'm still on right now, because saving that fish was such a win for me that I'm like, this is my thing. This is my thing in the hobby, my niche. And that's really how it started for me.
Nice.
Yeah, because we talk about that a lot, about when Derek brings fish into his shop, like there are so many contamination points along the distribution of the fish, like from the time they pick it up out of the ocean to the time it gets to the first guy, and then to the wholesaler, then the retail. There's so many points where the fish are just mixed in with, other fish, and it's just so many points where they can get different infections along the way, right? Like they may have not they might have had something made them clean when they came out of the ocean, but they've been in so many tanks by the time they actually get to Derek where he sells them. There's high risk that it's coming into contact with some bug somewhere.
And it's so much along the way. It's not just that they're exposed to various pathogens, it's that their immune system is compromised, because they're not really fed. I mean, not really. I mean, the wholesalers will try to put some flake food or pellets in the water. I mean, they're not going to eat that, not straight away. So they really, by the time in some cases, the first real meal they've had is if they get to a retailer who will feed them frozen food that they'll actually eat, or live food or whatnot. So that fish's immune system has been so compromised once it gets to that point that any pathogens that they have been exposed to along the way, they're obviously, if they were asymptomatic when they came out of the ocean, they're not going to be asymptomatic any longer. Any diseases that were latent are going to, you're going to see symptoms, and it's going to start to really affect them. And I think with a lot of, you kind of said infections, a lot of fish that people lose, you don't actually lose the fish from the parasite or the worm that they're carrying. Is a lot of times the secondary bacterial infection, which basically overwhelms their immune system. So their immune system can sometimes handle the parasite or the worm, but then when there's a secondary infection from where the parasites or worms have been feeding, and that takes hold, it just overwhelms their immune system.
Yeah.
And that kind of is what finishes them off, unfortunately.
What's the next question there, Derek?
What is his favorite method for your quarantine? Like your medicine or whatever?
So I've actually been developing a protocol called hybrid tank transfer method. And so tank transfer method is a quarantine method where you move the fish to a new clean aquarium every 72 hours. But what I've been doing to expand upon that is with 2 of those transfers, in between the transfers, 6 days apart, I give the fish a 150 parts per million hydrogen peroxide bath. And the reason I'm doing this is there was a peer-reviewed study that they gave fish that were infected with velvet a 30-minute hydrogen peroxide bath, and they did it twice, and it basically eliminated velvet. So I've been doing my own experimentation, going to various fish shops where I can buy diseased fish and running fish through this treatment protocol, fish that have ick, fish that have velvet, fish that have flukes, fish that have brook, and it's been working. I'm still testing it out, but it's kind of become, I don't know, my little signature thing that I'm working on. And I especially love it for people in Canada, because I know you guys have a hard time getting access to medications, but everybody can buy hydrogen peroxide. You can actually use 3% USP grade hydrogen peroxide to do this treatment. And it's basically just moving the fish to a sterile aquarium every 3 days. And then with 2 of those transfers, you have to do 6 days apart. You have to do a 30-minute, 150 parts per million hydrogen peroxide bath. And that's kind of becoming my go-to quarantine protocol now.
Because on your forum, there's quite a few of you guys talking about that as well, the H2O2 baths. So if people go to your forum, they can actually see that whole string line there that you guys have been talking about that. So
yes.
And there's a couple other fellows that are trying it with you, I think.
Yeah, we actually have on the forum, we have a compatibility list. So everyone that does it, they will post their successes and their failures. And I have a thread on my forum where I'm documenting every single species which has been exposed to this treatment and whether or not it was successful or not. And you can look at the numbers, the vast majority is successful. And I believe it's successful because you're not exposing fish to medication. It's not like long-term. So it isn't like copper where they're in it for 30 days continuously. And I mean, I use copper myself sometimes, but it's not where it's constantly suppressing their immune system. The fish is only exposed to chemicals for a total of 1 hour during the 12-day transfer treatment. And I feel like you're eliminating the pathogens while not damaging the fish's natural immune system. And you're able to then, also the fish there's no appetite suppression from the medications because it's just 30-minute baths that you're doing. So you're able to feed the fish, and the fish are eating well. Their immune system is being built up, and it's just working. It's working out really well. I just kind of feel like, a lot of people think that, well, quarantine is the only answer. It's just one piece of the puzzle. And, there's other pieces of the puzzle, like, your husbandry, your nutrition is very, very important. So I kind of feel that hybrid tank transfer method is the least invasive quarantine quarantine protocol for fish. And at the same time, you're able to then focus also on good nutrition and everything while you're running the fish through the transfer treatments.
Yeah. So what I really, really like about your website and what I've kind of picked up and what I started doing is the Molly quarantine. I'm a nurse by training, and my look at it, if you will, is us humans, we don't go around taking pre-meds for everything. Oh, I might get a cold, so I'm going to take my meds ahead of time. Or I might do this, so I'm going to take my... So I'm kind of against copper, and I'm kind of against, medicating fish proactively. Mm-hmm. Whereas my philosophy is more natural, is like put them in the tank, let them get settled, get them in there a couple of days, feed them frozen, get them nori, get them whatever it is that really gets them going. And then I just watched for a month with the mollies in there. And so far, as you can see behind me, it's worked. I haven't had, now having said that, if my mollies get sick, like the treatment, you just drop your mollies back down into fresh and you're good to rock and roll. Then I'd probably treat with copper, or then I'd probably treat with, whatever we can get in Canada. I don't know if we can even get that Mexiplexo or whatever it was there for a while. What's it called, Derek?
Metroplex from CP?
Metroplex. Yeah. I don't know if we can even get that anymore.
Nope.
No. So, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we could get in Canada is we just can't get it anymore.
So for those who are listening in Canada who do want to treat with copper, I actually have on my forum, there's a DIY copper recipe. that I didn't develop it. I just basically borrowed it from somebody, but it's very simple. It is just basically copper sulfate and citric acid, I believe, that you can combine to make your own copper sulfate solution. So if anybody does want to use copper, but you can't buy it in an aquarium store, you can just use that. And the treatment level is, I think it's 0.15 to 0.25 parts per million. You can check it with like the Hannah checker. Yeah. But no, I'm with you. Like, there was a time when I was copper, everything. And then I kind of went through my little stage where I was experimenting with chloroquine. That was the other thing I was using. But I've come to realize that, these medications are harmful. I mean, these medications have side effects. There's no doubt about it. They're a necessary evil. So that's kind of what was my thought behind developing new quarantine protocols like hybrid tank transfer method. Or you talked about black molly quarantine, where you basically use freshwater black mollies as canary fish alongside the fish you're quarantining, and you observe the black mollies along with the fish and kind of use them to help you detect diseases. Because as freshwater fish, they have no immunity, no resistance to saltwater pathogens. Yep. And those are kind of like some newer techniques that I am working on to, so people can move away from quarantine, can move away from chemoprophylaxis. Yeah. Because some people, copper has a bad reputation. They're like, no, I'm not going to use copper. Like, well, there are other ways you can quarantine if you don't want to use copper. Like you said, the black molly quarantine method is one way.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say I wouldn't not use medication on them afterwards. Like if there were, I would look up to see, how my fish are reacting, what disease I think it is, and then I would treat them with the most effective disease preventive, that I could, right? And that's kind of how you approach nursing too. Like when somebody gets sick, well, then you treat them with the best known, treatment for that disease process, right? So that's kind of how I started into looking into your form and things like that, was because I was looking for ways that, not necessarily that I didn't have to treat with medications, but use as few medications as possible, right? So, right. And the mollies, I mean, you just pop them in with the mollies for a month and a half, and everybody's swimming, everybody's eating, and nobody looks like there's a problem. Well, then they go in behind me.
Yeah, it's a great method. It's a great approach. There was a study that was done on it, which got me going on it. Was they actually used black mollies to propagate a strain of ick for, I believe, 2 years. And it didn't matter, even if the mollies were exposed to it during over this 2-year period, the trophons kept forming on the mollies. They kept dropping off. They would harvest tomonts. They would release therons, free swimmers into the water. So the crypto life cycle was continuous during this 2-year period, and the vectors, the mollies, and it didn't let up. I mean, even after 2 years, there were still visible white spots from trophons feeding on them even after 2 years. So mollies don't have very good resistance to saltwater diseases. And I mean, from a quarantine standpoint, well, that's what you want. That's your canary in a coal mine, so to speak.
Great.
I have a question. Do you do any biopsies? Because I do the tanks at Bass Pro Shop, and I follow their protocols for quarantining fish and stuff like that. And the biggest thing is the biopsies before they go into quarantine, and after, when the quarantine is done, I do another biopsy and send it off to them. Is that something that you do?
Do you mean by that
you take a scrape and you cut a piece of fin? If the fish is big enough, go in the gill, take a piece of gill and put it underneath the microscope. Is that something that you do?
Yes. I'm not real comfortable doing gill clippings on live fish. It's a little iffy, but yeah, skin scrapes is fine. Actually, on my forum, we actually have a video. I didn't do it. The video was done by, I'd have to look on my forum, but as a friend of mine, and it's how to do a skin scrape, and it's also microscope IDs for ick, velvet, brook, and uranema. So, you can see exactly what you're looking at under a microscope. So yeah, skin scrapes definitely. Gill clippings if the fish is post-mortem. I'm just not real comfortable doing gill clippings on a live fish. You can also do, if you suspect a bacterial disease, you can actually do what's called gram staining, where you can take a scrape and then you can do staining on it, and it will turn either pink or purple depending on if it's a gram positive or gram negative bacteria. So that's like kind of another little thing you can do to look for bacterial diseases on fish. The vast majority of infections on marine fish are going to be gram negative. And I'm not skilled enough to actually like examine it under a microscope to determine the species of offending bacterium that I'm dealing with. But at least by knowing if it's gram positive or gram negative, you can then kind of know like which antibiotics treat, you know, as cast a wide net and treat like gram negative or gram positive bacterial infections.
Cool. So I don't know if you read my email or not, but on our show, we do fish of the week, and we do product of the week, and we do a little section that's called Pay to Learn. So my question is to you: are like we select a fish every week? What is your favorite fish and why?
Well, my favorite fish is probably one that really most people should never keep in an aquarium unless you had a really enormous. I'm a really big fan of Pinnatus Batfish.
Oh, yeah.
I really, yeah. I mean, the juveniles are just stunning, and I even like the adult form once they change. But I don't like saying that too much because you need like a 500-600 gallon aquarium. They get so massive. I mean, they're so. I think they can be 18 inches top to bottom. So, wow. But a Pinnatus Batfish is by far my favorite fish. I love Pinnatus Batfish.
Yeah, there is a store in our area that brings them in from time to time because we're the wholesaler that carries them. And every time I see one on his list, I just shake my head because people don't realize, he's a beautiful little batfish, black with a nice red rim on them, and they look beautiful. But these suckers get big,
huge,
and quickly. Seriously. It's like trying to keep a pacu in fresh water, right? Like pacus are beautiful, but they're massive fish. And trying to keep them in a 100-gallon tank, it's just not going to work.
Hey, have you ever seen a tank with a school of Moorish idols?
No, not right up personally, but.
Yeah, that's a thing of beauty. And that's another thing. You have to have a very large aquarium, but you can actually do like in a 500 or 600 gallon aquarium or larger, you can do a nice school of Moorish idols. I usually do odd numbers like 5 to, 3 to 5, something like that. And what's cool about them is when you keep them in schools, they don't seem to quit eating like they do. Like sometimes when you keep a single specimen, they have a bad habit of they'll stop eating on you. They'll starve. They're prone to aggression from other fish. But it seems like when you keep them in schools, they don't stop eating. And they also, they're not prone to aggression from other fish. The only problem is with this fish is their metabolisms are so they have such a high metabolism. You have to feed these fish constantly. You have to feed them nori all day long. You have to feed them 5-6 times a day, small feedings. So they're not really suitable for most people because I mean, who can be home all day long to just every 3 hours you're dropping a little bit of frozen in the tank or some blackworms or something for these fish.
Oh, there's my next tank, Derek. See?
Oh my God. Here we go.
We're going to build the next one we're building. We're going to build it in my basement because it's just going to be too big to bring down. Here we had fun bringing it down. Derek said he'd never bring another tank into my house, but if we bring it in pieces and build it in my basement, technically you're not bringing a tank into my house.
Yeah, it's in sections.
Right.
It's in sections, yeah. So let's go with the product. Like product, what is your favorite product? I mean, I'm talking about equipment or whatever.
Or something every reefer should have.
Yeah.
I feel a protein skimmer because I mean, I can be myself personally, I can be a little lax on maintenance. I don't really keep up with water changes like I should probably. And I really feel like a protein skimmer is kind of it's kind of an insurance policy, if you will, because it's removing organics from the water and it's keeping the water a little bit cleaner and everything. So probably would be a protein skimmer, like a nice, and I like oversized protein skimmers. I mean, on my last 150 gallon, I had a skimmer that was rated for like 400 or 500 gallons.
Yeah.
And I really I've always told people, look, the first time you ever dump out the junk that a skimmer collects and you smell that, you're going to be a believer. I mean, it's some nasty stuff.
Oh, it is nasty. I like Kevin clean all that at the shop.
Yeah, I do. I don't think Derek's cleaned a skimmer in 10 years or so.
Well, I do all my service tanks, so I do all those. So I'll let him do the shop ones. Yeah,
somebody's got to do it, eh?
Yeah, someone's got to do it. So
you ever seen, I'm sorry, the people that like these have the massive tanks that have like those just ridiculous size skimmers, like people that have like a 5,000 gallon aquarium and the skimmer is down in the basement, it's taller than it's over 6 feet tall and all this stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've seen
No,
some
that's
of those
actually,
around.
that's my next skimmer for I'm building a new store and I want to get a big R2K.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
seen them down in Mackinac. Derek and I went down to Mackinac in Las Vegas there before all this COVID stuff started blowing everything up. But yeah, we went down to Las Vegas and seen the big skimmers down there and everything. And yeah, it was a good trip. It was a good Mackinac that year.
Yeah. Do you ever go to the Mackinacs?
I have not been in quite a while. I have been to a couple. I don't know, not since COVID, I haven't gone to any shows just because, you know, the threat. I'm actually going to be, I'm a speaker at Reef Currents, which is going to be in Houston, September 11th. That will actually be my first time going back to a show in probably like 3 or 4 years.
Really? Is that going to be online? Is that going to be, or is that all?
I don't really know, to be honest with you. I know I've been going back and forth talking to them, and I got the invitation, and they have me on their website as one of the speakers. And I think it's the club is called Marsh, and it's for Houston, Texas. It's their local club, and it's their local show.
Okay.
Called Reef Currents, and I know they've postponed it. I don't know how many times because of you know, COVID.
Yeah.
And I know before they wanted me to be a speaker, but you know, I was like, man, not, you know, COVID. But now, you know, well, I don't know. Is it really dying down? I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to be a speaker for that, and yeah, it'll be. But it's a local show. But I mean, Texas has a you know, like Dallas, Austin, a lot of reefers. So I think it's kind of like a regional show, and that people come. But it's the week after Mackinac, so I don't know how many people are, you know, going to make the trip from other parts of the country because of the, you know, the time.
Mackinac online this year, the 3rd to the 5th. And I think it's $50 American, I think it is. So I'll probably end up going. I haven't got my ticket yet, but I'll probably end up going online. I did last year as well.
Yeah. Or next year we'll probably do Mackinac again.
Yeah.
I think things should be back to normal next year.
Well, I hope so.
I'm hoping at least. Yeah.
I'm supposed to be in Florida in January, so they better chill out down there before I get down there.
I'm in Florida, and it's yeah, it's kind of wild here right now. I mean, you know, I mean, I'm the only person still wearing a mask, I think.
So which part of Florida are you from?
Well, so we actually live in the Panhandle, which is I live in, it's called Navarre, Florida. It's, if you look on a map, it'd be the Florida Panhandle in between Pensacola and Destin, Florida. But we're actually moving. We're moving in 3 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks. And this is going to sound ridiculous, but we're actually, my wife and I, we work virtual. So we're going on a road trip. We're just basically going to live in condos and hotels, and we're going to do that until we get tired of it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No, I got a buddy of mine, Chris. He runs the fish store. I think it's Fort Pierce. I think that's where his location is. But yeah, I was just wondering if you ever been there or not.
Yeah, we may end up going down there. That's I think Fort Pierce, that's more on the peninsula side. I don't really know if Fort Pierce, I think it's still on the Gulf side, because there's a Gulf side and the Atlantic side, and the peninsula. Yeah, I'm in the kind of like where, you know, the armpit of Florida kind of turns, and then there's
yeah.
So if you look at Alabama, I mean, I'm basically just south of Alabama is where we are right here. It's kind of a different thing from the peninsula.
Yeah, it's where all the hurricanes from the coast.
Yeah.
You ever watch CNN, you'll see, oh, that's where he lives, right there where that hurricane's coming in.
Yeah, Hurricane Michael, which did a lot of damage to Mexico Beach. It was like a Category 5. We live like maybe 2 hours east of there. So I'm sorry, 2 hours west of there. So
cool. And so
we don't get hurricanes up here. We don't have to worry too much about that.
Well, we do get sometimes.
Ice storms we get, hurricanes not so much.
A lot of hurricanes. I mean, well, a lot of snow though.
Yeah, we have a lot of snow. And so on the show, we also have a section that's called Pay to Learn. And I have a customer, and that was his saying, because he would buy stuff and make that mistake where it would eat all his corals or whatever. And he always said, I pay to learn.
Yeah, so, we always warned them though.
We always warned them too, yeah. but anyways, for you, what is your biggest pay to learn mistake that that you have made that you said, you know what, I should have done this or I should have done that?
I mean, not quarantining. I mean, that's what it comes back to for me. And I mean, just not just for me, but for, a lot of people, because, I think people that have been in this hobby a long time, they kind of figure out ways to manage diseases. I mean, you manage diseases, whether you're running a UV sterilizer, you're feeding really well, or you can run an oxidator. But especially for someone just coming in the hobby, like straight away, you need methods that are repeatable. Because you will get better as you gain experience, but right out the door, you really need methods that are repeatable. And I just feel like quarantining, and as I call it, disease eradication, is more easily repeatable than management for a new hobbyist. Because like there are this is how you quarantine, step by step by step. These are the medications you can use. There's a very, I feel, easy to follow process. And how many times have we seen, you probably see it, where someone skips quarantining, they put all kind of fish in their tank, and they lose everything. They lose thousands of dollars of fish, and then a lot of them just throw up their hands and say, yeah, I'm not doing this, I'm gonna quit the hobby. So that to me is the single biggest mistake. It's my single biggest regret that I made when we came back from Europe. I didn't quarantine because I lost a lot of fish, and I think it's a mistake that a lot of new hobbyists make as well.
Yeah. Now there's ethical in Alberta. You're going to mention that about the ethical. They're using your quarantine method, or their developed quarantine method. And in the States, there are a few fellows down there that are quarantining fish and selling fish to hobbyists down there as well. It's just hard for us to get them across the border. So, but you wanted to mention that too, didn't you?
So yeah, there is actually on my forum, I actually interviewed him just yesterday. His name is Chris, and the business is Ethical Aquatics. And I'll be releasing later on my YouTube channel my interview with him. And yeah, he's over in Alberta, Canada, and he quarantines fish, and he is like an online business only, and he ships all over Canada. So, people want to buy, you guys might know other vendors, but he's the vendor that I ran across that I approved to sell on my forum. And he sells quarantined, not just quarantined, but quarantine conditioned fish, because he does the chemoprophylaxis on the front end, and then he moves them into his observation tanks and uses black mollies to make sure that no diseases slip through. And at the same time, he does what I call power feeding, which is basically where you're feeding the fish multiple times a day, very small meals. You're building up their immune system. The fish is strengthened. So that way, when it comes time to sell the fish has been sufficiently conditioned to ship all over. Well, he ships all over Canada. And, look, we all know that hiccups can happen with shipping. And also, if there's a mishap, a lot of times the fish can survive it. I was doing it for like 3 years, and maybe we lost we had 2 or 3 losses. And all that time, I mean, what I mean is like shipping mishap losses.
Yeah.
Where I shipped out fish to clients and the fish didn't make it.
Yeah. See, that's what Derek is slowly implementing in his shop as well. He's been doing quarantine protocols and so forth. And that I think, Derek, that's your goal as well, is to become.
Yeah. That's my goal. I want to set up like 6 systems, right? So when I have the fish, I want to hold them for 40 days, kind of do like the same thing. And then, every week, every time there's an order comes in, they go to a system. So we have that rotation of those 6 weeks where, that fish in that system, after their 6th week, they go out to the floor to sell, and then a new order goes in that system, right?
Excellent. Yeah, that's excellent. Something else you could think about doing is, and I don't see too many vendors offering this, is quarantine corals and inverts. So the corals and inverts can carry the tomont stage, the encysted stage of ick and velvet, and they can carry it for up to 6 weeks. And it's easy enough to eliminate. You basically just place any new corals and inverts that you're getting from your wholesalers into fishless systems that are, at least, they're at least 10 feet away from your fish systems. You just let them sit. And what will happen is, in that time, the tomonts will rupture. They'll release free swimmers in the water. But without a fish host, they die ick dies within 48 hours. So basically, if the coral or invert happen to have tomonts by isolating them to a fishless environment for 6 weeks, then any diseases become or rendered inert, and you're selling clean quarantine corals and inverts. Because what happens to a lot of people here is they quarantine their fish, but they don't quarantine their corals and inverts, and they'll go place, especially like seems really bad for some reason cleanup crew, and they'll go place a big cleanup crew order. Well, tomos can insist to those shells, and next thing you know, they've got a massive ichor velvet outbreak in their tank.
That's true, because I do plan on doing that too for the corals.
Yeah. That is an untapped market. That is a market. I mean, I don't know. I know maybe only 1 or 2 that are really doing that here in the U.S. And I know when I talked to Chris, he's doing it like for anemones, but he's really not. He doesn't really sell quarantine corals inverts. So that's completely untapped market right there.
Yeah, I know. And Derek, like you dip everything that comes in, and you do all that stuff with corals. So there are protocols that you're already doing that.
Yes, but I want to quarantine them for 6 weeks. That is the whole plan. Yeah. So
because dips won't kill tomos. They actually did a study, and it took 60 parts per million chlorine 24 hours to kill ictomos.
Wow.
That is just. I mean, these things they form a shell, they form a cyst around themselves, and they're that well protected. It took 60 ppm chlorine 24 hours to completely eliminate ictomos.
Wow.
Yeah.
And once they're in your system, it's like you said, once they're in there, they're in there. It's almost impossible to get them out unless you go fishless. Basically, right?
It's basically a time bomb is what it is. I mean, you got these things in there, and it's only a matter of time before they rupture. And once they rupture, they release free swimmers. The free swimmers actively seek fish out because that's their food source. Once they latch on, once they form trophonts, the cycle begins.
Yeah.
So how many stores in US do you know that actually quarantine their fish like that you would like?
Well, on my forum, I think we have 6 vendors that I personally trust. I've vetted them enough to where I trust that I would buy fish from them and drop them right in my TT. There are some other stores, online vendors I know who are, either selling quarantine fish, but they take shortcuts. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I understand sometimes that it's they can't properly quarantine the fish because of where I live, the market we're in right here, it's very difficult to sell anything high end. Everybody kind of wants everything on the cheap. Well, when you're in a market like this, how can you really offer quarantine fish knowing that people aren't going to pay those prices? Because I mean, you do have to charge more. I mean, if you don't, I was charging 50% above retail for it, and maybe you should charge 100% above retail, because when the time and the medications and the just things people don't even consider, like the amount of water and salt you're using, my electric bill tripled. So I mean, from running these additional quarantine tanks, so you really have to be able to recoup that money. So not too many actually do it thoroughly, I feel, to where they can kind of somewhat guarantee you're getting a disease-free fish. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and it's I know some local fish shops here that I've advised, and I've kind of helped them, and they've quarantined the fish, and they're still quarantining the fish. But I'm just going to be blunt with you and honest with you. A lot of them have been disappointed because they have not been able to find people, hobbyists, willing to pay the extra that they need to pay for the quarantine livestock. Because, I mean, I hate to say this, but money, a lot of people are worried about their bottom line, and they're just basically they're just going to buy what's the cheapest. And I mean, I know people that will buy, I hate to say this, 5-6 Regal Angels and kill them before they'll just go spend the extra money to buy a quarantine Regal Angel that's already eating, that's disease-free, et cetera, et cetera.
A lot of these fish really should be left in, there's a store in this area brings in clean Erasmus, and it absolutely drives me nuts when stores bring it. Derek doesn't bring them in anymore just because I've harped and complained and cried at him enough. Really, that's a fish that should be left in the ocean. Unless you have a big tank, clean Erasmus, they're just not going to live long term.
Right.
And so that there's fish And Regals are another one. Regals should be just left in the ocean. Like they're just too hard to keep. We lose too many of them before you get one that actually makes it, right? So
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of fish like that. Copper band butterflies is another one I can think of. Everybody wants a copper band butterfly, but I can tell you right now, my success rate was 50% because half the times I got in a specimen that would eat, the other half it wouldn't eat. And the ones that don't eat, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter. I mean, I was feeding black worms and white worms, and I was getting clams and mussels and everything under the sun I could think of. The fish just flat out won't eat for some unknown reason. And then I've had some that on day one were eating, eating frozen food, eating brine shrimp, mysis shrimp, whatever.
Yep.
And no rhyme or reason, it seems, for it sometimes.
Yeah, we had Pinocchio, which was one that I was actually hand feeding frozen, and customer bought it. He had a very big tank, and he cleaned out all the aptasia of the tank, and then just popped up dead one day. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like that, like you have a fish that seems to be thriving, and as soon as it cleans out its natural food source, it was done. So I mean,
I've sold some that were eating for me, and they were eating, I even took videos of the fish eating frozen, whatever. I sold them to a client or a customer that had an aptasia problem. The copper band promptly cleaned the tank of aptasia and stopped, would not eat anything else.
Yeah.
So, it got a taste for aptasia, and then for some strange reason, it wouldn't go back to prepared foods.
Yeah. So there's a lot of fish that, different stores bring in that, and the Batfish is a prime example.
Oh, yeah.
A fish that should never, ever be brought into a store. I mean, if you have a client with a massive tank and he comes in and says, order me this, and his tank's big enough and able to do that animal long-term, then yeah, sure, bring it in for him. But these stores and things that are bringing in, vendors that are bringing in fish that really should be left in the ocean.
Right. But it's I guess because it's kind of a what's the saying, like you're window shopping and it's impulse buying is what it is. So you go into a fish shop and you see a Pinnatus Batfish and you're like, oh, it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to buy it, but you really shouldn't. Yeah, and I guess it's what that's the strategy.
Yeah. Do your research. Never buy a fish that you haven't researched. It's plain simple. And I stress that very much on Derek and our show that, research is just one of those things you must do in this hobby.
Exactly.
I know, and how many times we told people at the store and they just were so pissed off at us.
Yeah.
Just trying to tell them, what, no, this fish is not really for your size of a system and this and that. And they would just almost run out of the store all pissed off.
And go to a different store and buy it and then call us and say, we got a problem with this fish. Remember? It happened more than once.
It's kind of strange because there's people in this hobby, and it seems like we're all three of us are like, these are pets, these are animals, these are living things. And I get emotionally affected. If I ever lose a fish for whatever reason, I just get, it really, really bothers me. And it just seems to be, there's some people in the hobby, they don't see it that way. It's something else. I don't know. And some people even they even seem like it's just an inanimate object to them. And that really pisses me off because I'm like, no, it's an animal.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of funny. Like I do the tank at Bass Pro, and when I go in that tank, they recognize me. They know me. Like all these striper bass and that muskie, they come and see me. It's like you get kind of attached to them. And I even walk in front of that tank, and I'll see other people walk in front of the tank. They don't react the same. They actually see me across that tank, and they all come towards me, just like that in that movie where Buddy was the what's his name there, Steve Carell, where he moving the corner and the fish would follow him. You feel the same way when I go at Bass Pro. So you get attached to them. People should understand that it's like you said, it's a pet.
Yeah. These animals, like some of them will live 15, 20 years. So if you had a dog and you brought your dog home and the dog died after 2 years, you'd say, well, I successfully kept it for 2 years. Well, a dog normally lives 10 to 15 years. The same thing about your fish. These animals are supposed to, they have a life expectancy, and if everything's kept proper and they're treated properly, they should have a long life. To me, to say, oh yeah, I kept my yellow tang for 2 years. Well, to me, that's not successfully keeping a yellow tang. Like,
Right.
I've had the two of them behind me. They're both of them been together for about 10 years. I bought them off another hobbyist that got out of the hobby. So those two yellows are at least 10 years old. So, I mean, you know, to me, that's successfully keeping a yellow tang.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. That's how it should be. And it's I actually, so speaking of fish stores, I actually have a friend that owns a local fish store. It's in a small community in Louisiana, which is my home state here down in the US. And he quarantines all of his fish. And the thing is, he's in a very small market, and he was selling quarantine fish. Well, guess what? People stopped buying fish from him because their fish stopped dying, which was a great thing for the hobby, but he found it was a bad thing for business because he was no longer really, I mean, they kept buying coral and stuff, but they kept, stopped buying fish because they're like, well, I mean, every time the customer would come in, it's like, well, I really don't have any more room. Fish don't die anymore, 2-3 years. Well, great for the hobby, maybe not so good for business, and I think that's really that's the problem. It's like, what is best for the hobby is not necessarily always what's best for business. I was sort of naive about that before I started my own business, and I kind of realized some things about the aquarium industry that I didn't realize before. So yeah, it's tough.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah, it's a very tough business to be in. I mean, it's really tough. I was doing it just as an online business selling quarantine fishing. I mean, I was working like 70, 80 hours. It was crazy.
Yeah. I know that. Well, you know what? I'm very fortunate because I do a lot of tank servicing. That is my milk and bread, right there. If I didn't have that, Bobby, I'd be long gone.
Yeah, the money is in maintenance. Yeah, I did maintenance. Well, I started off doing maintenance, and then they found out I was good at the quarantining, so I got stuck just doing the quarantine part of the business. But I did maintenance for about 5 years, working for a very, very large company, and yeah, it was very profitable for the owner.
For the owner, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Derek, Bobby, do you guys get anything else? For me, I really, really want to thank you, Bobby, for joining us. I really appreciate you dropping in, and I think this is kind of neat. You're actually our first guest on our little show, I guess we can call it. We're not looking to be great big, we're not looking to speak at Mackin or anything like that. We just want to keep people, informed with good information, and I think that's our driver behind it, is just try to get the best information out there, and because there is a lot of people out there that they mean well or should mean well, but their information isn't as accurate as it should be.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you both. Thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed it.